Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
The Hall of Fame game is a great time to celebrate the beginning of a new football season, but also the greatness of past players like class of 2024, Dwight Freeney. Also, what has gone wrong with the Phillies since the All-Star break? And the NFL should not replace the chain gang. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
I'm Peter Bukowski, starting your day with the can't-miss stories and biggest debates in sports. You're Locked On Sports Today.
Searching all major sports. Found.
Let's start with the biggest story.
We'll get to the greatness of Dwight Freeney in a moment, but we begin today's show by celebrating the greatness of Katie Ledecky. She is now the unquestioned best female swimmer in the history of the sport. If she wasn't already, she may be the best female athlete ever. With silver in the 4x200 meter relay, Ledecky has 13 Olympic medals, the most in women's history in the United States, and in fact, the most in the world among female swimmers. She has 8 golds, 4 silvers, and 1 bronze in her Olympic career. Dwight Freeney's journey started at Syracuse, where he was a standout first-round pick of the Indianapolis Colts. 125.5 sacks later, 3 first-team All-Pro, 7 Pro Bowls, a Super Bowl title. Dwight Freeney is a Hall of Famer. Jake Arthur from Locked On Colts joins me now. And Jake, Dwight had the signature spin move, but he was a really, really productive player, and I would say an underrated player for a long time in his career. What are you going to remember about Dwight Freeney in a Colts uniform?
Yeah, the spin move, of course, like when someone has their own patented move, like, Reggie White with the hump move or something, you're always going to remember that. But I'll remember Dwight Freeney for, number one, proving a lot of the doubters wrong, because he wasn't your prototypical defensive end type coming out, kind of a short, squat guy. But he produced right away, 10 plus sacks as a rookie. But he was a closer in an era of Indianapolis Colts football that was all known about Peyton Manning. Freeney did exactly what he needed to, which was protect the Colts leads that Manning got and close out the game with like a patented strip sack, game over. And he delivered all the time.
With the defenses that Peyton Manning had, you mentioned Peyton Manning getting all the accolades. It was Dwight Freeney, it was Bob Sanders, but really the stars, Robert Mathis, of course. But it seemed like Freeney was the one constant in all of this. And even when the defenses weren't very good, he was putting up huge numbers. And I feel like that might be the reason why we end up underrating him, because it's like, well, how many great defenses was he a part of? Well, the answer is very few, but that's not his fault. He was individually a great player.
Yeah, absolutely. The Colts ran that Tampa 2 defense, which was nicknamed, the bend but don't break defense. It was like, that's exactly what it was. They were very reliant on those big plays from Freeney and Mathis and Sanders. And honestly, when you talk about legacy, and you said Dwight Freeney is a bit underrated, when I think about that, the Colts, some of their biggest shortcomings of that era, because again, everyone says, how did Peyton Manning only end up with 1 Super Bowl win in Indianapolis? There's 2 seasons that really stick out that you can relate directly back to Dwight Freeney injuries and it perhaps costing them winning another Super Bowl. That 2007 team was arguably the best team of the Manning era. But Dwight Freeney, I think 9 games in, had a Liz Frank injury in his foot. It cost them the rest of the season. That was a really, really good team. It's the same year that Bob Sanders won Defensive Player of the Year. So that tells you that defense was actually finally legit that year. And then, of course, the year that the Colts lost the Super Bowl against the Saints, Freeney was playing on a high ankle sprain and managed to get breezed down for a 1-arm sack in that first half, but was just cooked and could not give it anything else really in that second half.
Is he going to be the best defensive player of the modern era in the Indianapolis Colts?
That's a great question. Now that Shaquille Leonard, his career was kind of brought to an abrupt halt, because he was certainly on a Hall of Fame trajectory. It's gonna be Freeney for a while. I mean, fingers crossed that Latu can do something to kind of rewrite that. But the Colts have been searching for their next Dwight Freeney since he left, or since really they showed him the door. But Freeney is on a lot of people's Colts Mount Rushmore.
Just, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but can you name offhand, without looking, how many teams he played for after leaving Indianapolis?
I want to say 4. I know Cardinals and Chargers and Falcons. Did he play with the Seahawks too?
Yep. And you only missed one, Detroit. So it's actually 5 teams after. I would never have guessed it's 5, but it is 5 teams after. And in 2015, this is just a reminder of great players being great. In 2015, with Arizona, he had 8 sacks in 11 games. He did not start one of them.
I remember he was just kind of a hired gun for a while at the end of his career. 1-year deals. I feel like at least a couple times he was brought in like mid-season, and he had these just short bursts of productivity, and it worked out. He obviously wasn't a guy who could be a 3-down player anymore, but those very small sample sizes that he could give you a handful of sacks, he was successful.
Stay up to date all year on the Indianapolis Colts by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Colts on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Sports Today your first listen. Coming up, what's gone wrong with the Phillies? Before we get to that, Simone Biles is incredible. Game Time makes getting to the ballpark even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, and their best price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. They're obsessed with finding ways to help you save money on tickets. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last-minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And the Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the free app, and new users can get $20 off their first purchase with code Locked On. Terms apply. That's code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, the lowest price guaranteed. If you're catching this episode of Locked On Sports Today after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Speaking of the greatest of all time, Simone Biles. She won gold for the women's all-around gymnastics event, the second time Biles has done that. But honestly, this one was a nail-biter for her, certainly by her standards. Biles fell to third place after a surprising lackluster performance on the uneven bars. She bounced back, though, and reclaimed the lead after the beam. The overall difference between her and silver medalist Rebecca Andrade of Brazil was just 1.199 points. Biles said of the slim margin, "I'm proud. She's way too close. I've never had an athlete that close. But it definitely put me on my toes, and it brought out the best athlete in myself." We talked to Jake Arthur about Dwight Freeney, but they did play a football game to celebrate the 2024 NFL draft class. 31 points in the first half combined between the Texans and the Bears, but none of the familiar faces were part of that. We didn't get to see Caleb Williams. We didn't get to see CJ Stroud or Stephon Diggs or any of the stars we would see in a regular season game here, but plenty of points in the first half before severe weather delayed the game with a little over 3 minutes left in the third quarter. Remember, this is all to celebrate the festivities of the 2024 NFL Hall of Fame class that features Dwight Freeney, Devin Hester, Andre Johnson, Julius Peppers, Patrick Willis, Randy Gradishar, and Steve McMichael. In NFL training camp news, the Chargers avoided a scare with quarterback Justin Herbert. He was diagnosed with a plantar fascia injury in his right foot on Thursday. Reports are, though, he should be ready for week 1, but he will be in a boot for at least 2 weeks. He'll then be on a gradual return to play protocol after the boot is removed. Herbert was one of the most durable quarterbacks in the NFL through his first 4 seasons. He started 62 consecutive games, the second longest active streak by a quarterback before a fracture to his right index finger in week 14. Ended his season last year. Elsewhere on the practice field, Daniel Jones turned in his best day of camp yet for the Giants.
Hey everybody, it's Patricia Trainer from Locked On Giants. And on the seventh day, New York Giants quarterback Daniel Jones had maybe his best practice of the summer since being cleared to do team drills. Jones went 11 of 15, throwing 2 beautiful deep balls that went for touchdowns and seemingly doing a better job with the timing of his passes. All of this taking place behind an offensive line that was again without starting center John Michael Schmitz, and which saw another shuffling of the line to compensate for the injuries. The Giants have downplayed the injuries to the offensive line, but with the first litmus test coming up against the Detroit Lions in joint practices on Monday, this situation continues to be a concern because how well are they going to be able to assess where the team really is if they keep shuffling guys in and out of the lineup at the most critical position outside of cornerback? I'll have more on this and other stories from Giants training camp coming up on the Locked On Giants podcast.
A month ago, the Philadelphia Phillies were the favorites to win it all in Major League Baseball. Since the All-Star break, though, 3-9 and trying to find it a little bit after dropping after dropping all 3 to the New York Yankees in a sweep by the Bronx Bombers. Connor Thomas from Locked On Phillies joins me now. And Connor, what has changed with this team over the last couple weeks?
The same thing that can change with any team in baseball. They're in a slump, and I wish it was a different type of sport where you just have golden opportunities all the time and your great players are always great. But in baseball, we know that even the best teams in the history of the sport go through stretches like this. The Rangers, who won the World Series last year, went through a similar stretch in the regular season, and the hitting has not been consistent. Bryce Harper, Trey Turner, guys at the top of the order that you expect to be great, have been in major slumps. There was like 2 hits between the 2 of them over that 3-game series with the Yankees. The pitching hasn't been historically good, which you kind of expected, and the bullpen's been shaky. So it's just a bad team for the whole team to be bad time for the whole team to be going through a rough stretch. That's just kind of where we're at right now, Pete.
It does feel a little concerned, Trolley, though, Connor, because they're still at the top of the National League East, and they have the second best run differential in all of baseball. So it's sort of like we're picking nits a little bit, but again, as I said a month ago, this was the odds-on favorite to win the title. Do you still feel like they deserve to be that because we know what they can do, all things put together?
I think it's hard to pick odds-on favorites for a World Series in August, especially the first day of August. There's a lot of time to go. Like, we are as close to the end of May as we are to the end of the regular season, and a lot can change over the next 2 months. What I will say is I don't have any questions about the ceiling of this team. It'd be different if this was a team that was trying to bust through and make it to the postseason for the first time, and we hadn't seen them in October before. We know that the Phillies have October experience. They've rolled back generally the same roster as they've had the past 2 years or so when they've been making these deep playoff runs. So I still think the ceiling of this team is a World Series victory. I just know that getting there was never going to be easy. It's kind of like object permanence when it comes to sports. If you don't see it right now, sometimes people forget it exists. But this team is still just as talented as they were when they were playing at a 700 win clip and being the best team in baseball. So I don't think that changes. You just got to mentally withstand the stretch, whether you're a fan or whether you're a player on the team.
Because of the way this works, Connor, you and I do shows every day. We are constantly in the muck. You do lose the forest for the trees a little bit. And we forget, we call this the dog days of summer in baseball anyway. That's what this is about. And as you mentioned, this is a team that what matters is October, not August 1. And sometimes I think we miss the human element of it's a long season. This is going to happen to every team, even teams that win, 90 plus games, 95, 100 games. They go through stretches where they don't look great.
Yeah, inexplicably, though, this is the same. Here's what's scaring Phillies fans, I think. This is the same type of issue that cost them against the Diamondbacks in the NLCS last year and somewhat against the Astros. Now, the Astros in the World Series in 22 were the better team, and they had an amazing pitching staff. It is what it is. You never want to get no hit in the World Series, but that team, you just have to tip your cap. Yeah. The Diamondbacks last year, you just had the top 6 or 7 bats in your order go absolutely silent with 1 win needed and 2 games at home to do it. And now when you see this stretch of how in the world is Bryce Harper not hitting, Trey Turner not hitting, JT Realmuto not hitting, people get scared of, oh, this team has the same flaws. What you've got to realize, what you've got to come to terms with is that is just the sport of baseball, and it can happen at any point. And the way you get through October is a lot of skill, some experience, and a little bit of luck. And I think this is just one of those times where The balls are getting hit hard. They're not falling. When you make a mistake pitch rather than a foul ball, you're hitting it 400 feet in the seats for Aaron Judge and the Yankees and Jazz Chisholm. I mean, it's just everything's going wrong. And when things click over and everything's going right again, this team will look just as much like the World Series contenders as I believe them to be.
Part of this is Philadelphia sports DNA, though. They're waiting for the shoe to drop. They're waiting for something to go wrong. That's just how this works. Is there any concern that trickles into, like, you get the fan experience, that all of a sudden that the fans get a little nervous, you feel the energy at the ballpark, and now the players are a little bit tighter than they might otherwise be?
It does happen, but I don't think there's a possible way it lasts for 2 months and affects the rest of the season and into the postseason. You got to remember, this team last year in the first 2 months of the season played horribly. And in 2022, before they moved on from Joe Girardi, they were well behind the 8 ball. So we've seen stretches from this team like this before. And the crazy thing about the last 2 seasons is they happened before we saw any high level play out of them. And you could still look at the talent of those past 2 rosters and say, this team still has something. So who would we be to have seen this team play like the best team in baseball for a majority of the season and then see a bit of a slide and say, oh, well, that completely trumps everything we've seen the rest of the way. I do understand the negativity of the fan base. I do understand the culture of the Philadelphia fan and how that works. It's a tough thing to overcome. But that's a great thing about having a roster with a lot of guys who have been here for a couple years. They've seen it. They've been through it. They know how to fight out of it. And that's going to be the biggest thing, is experience in times like these.
Stay up to date all year on the Philadelphia Phillies by subscribing to Locked On Sports Today and Locked On Phillies on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Coming up, the chain gang should remain on the gridiron. The NFL is testing the idea of replacing the chain gang. Locked On NFL host Tyler Rowland tells co-host Alex Clancy why he thinks that's a bad idea.
First and foremost, NFL does a deal with Sony. They're going to have Sony headphones on the sidelines and all that. But as part of that deal, during the preseason, they're going to test using laser technology and GPS technology in lieu of the chain gang. Classic chain gang we've all grown to love. From Pee Wee all the way to the NFL, one thing you can count on is the chain gang. All right, Alex. This segment is called Rage Against the Machine. All right, that's what's happening here. The NFL is entertainment, folks. We are here to be entertained. And I feel the same way about umpires in baseball. Yeah, the umpire may get a little call wrong. The ball may be a little outside and he calls it a strike. But seeing an umpire ring somebody up, that is part of the magic of all of this. Like, to me, there are some people out there that want everything just calcified into a scientific measurement, like with the wave of analytics being used is a part of that. And I'm not saying that we need to crush all that and go back to the Stone Age, but we are losing some of the human element that makes things special when we go too far to the technology. So seeing the referee come out, stick that chain in the ground and seeing the ball be an inch short and having the ref throw the inch up like that, and you get a stop on 4th down in your team, like just having that flashed up on a board because it's already calculated by a laser, that is less entertaining. That is less magical. That is less memorable. It is a better, quote unquote, result, but it is a worse experience. So to me, I think we're going too far.
Look, I'm not in favor of keeping the chain gang. The chain gang is medieval. It is absurd. It is ridiculous. And I understand that for Ty, that's part of the appeal, that the absurdity is part of what makes it kind of fun. But I think what people are missing is replacing the chain gang is not a foolproof solution to fixing spots, because you still have these middle-aged men from across the field trying to decide where the ball has to be spotted. And then they run over and they put their foot down and they go, here, and they slam the ball down. Then you can use the eagle eye technology to see, okay, is that spot a first down? That is a better way of measuring than a chain, which again is ridiculous. But you're not going to fix the problem of the bad spots unless you go to the replay review. So this is a half measure. It's better. It's a better system if what you want is more accuracy, and it's going to get more accuracy based on the spots. The problem is it's not going to fix the spots. And until we have a solve for what is a real problem when it comes to football, like tennis is easy. You have the technology, the mapping technology, where you can see exactly where the ball goes. They can track it and do all of the crazy advanced technology things that give you exactly where the ball lands. That's not possible in football because the ball carrier might be surrounded by 5 other guys. It's clouded. They don't have the wearable technology to make this all straightforward. We have a long way to go. Making the chain gang a thing of the past is a good thing, but it is like a marginal improvement over what is still a pretty big problem in officiating. And finally, sometimes the internet is good. Team USA Olympics discus thrower Veronica Fraley posted on X that she's about to compete in the Olympics, but can't afford her rent. She's a student at Vanderbilt University and cited the fact that football players get plenty of perks for being football players, but she barely gets any help and works just as hard at her sport as they do. Well, the internet answered as Flava Flav and Reddit co-founder Alexis Ohanian both offered to pay her rent. Ohanian even screenshotted the tagline for the payment on a money transferring app that read Murica with an American flag and a gold medal next to it. Is this the first recorded good deed on the internet? No, but it's pretty cool. If you're catching this episode after hearing your favorite Locked On show, make sure to subscribe to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you never miss an episode. Also, if you're a new subscriber to Locked On Sports Today, we're here for you with the biggest stories in sports every day. Coming up next week, who has the most to gain in the NFL preseason? So at least until tomorrow, stay Locked On Sports Today.
Locked On Podcast Network presents Locked On Sports Today.
For more episodes of Locked On Sports Today, go to our video on demand. Click on Sports at the top of your screen. There, you'll find past episodes of Locked On Sports Today, plus other Locked On shows on demand.